Hello. General Hospital spoilers will reveal. The latest developments surrounding the adoption storyline on General Hospital suggest that Brook Quartermaine and Harrison Chase may soon face an unexpected emotional storm just as they begin to believe their dream of building a family is finally within reach. For months, the possibility of them adopting baby Jane has been presented as a hopeful turning point, a chance for the couple to transform years of longing and disappointment into something meaningful and permanent. Everything seemed to be aligning in their favor. The Quartermaine family home, long known as a place filled with complicated history but also immense loyalty, appeared ready to welcome a new generation. For Brook, Lynn, and Chase, the idea of raising Jane within that chaotic yet loving household symbolized more than simply becoming parents. It represented healing, stability, and a new chapter after the many emotional trials they have endured together. Yet the fragile optimism surrounding this adoption may soon collapse if the child's biological father suddenly emerges, threatening to unravel the life they have only just begun to imagine. Brook, Lynn, and Chase's path toward parenthood has never been straightforward. Their journey has been defined by a series of painful realizations that tested both their patience and the strength of their relationship. The first and most devastating obstacle came when they learned that Chase was unable to have children. For a man who values family and loyalty as deeply as Chase does, the news struck at the core of his identity. It forced him to confront fears about inadequacy and loss, while Brook struggled with the quiet heartbreak of watching the man she loves wrestle with the reality neither of them could change. Rather than allowing that revelation to divide them, however, the couple made a deliberate choice to redefine what family meant. Adoption became not a compromise, but a new hope, a way to channel their love and commitment into raising a child who needed a home. That decision reflected the emotional maturity both characters had developed over time, showing their willingness to move forward together despite circumstances beyond their control. Just as they began embracing the possibility of adoption, another shocking revelation threatened to derail everything. The truth about Gio Palmieri's identity surfaced, revealing that he was actually the son Brook had given up years earlier during her teenage years. The discovery reopened wounds that Brook had buried for a long time. As a young girl overwhelmed by circumstances, she had made the painful choice to place her baby for adoption, believing it was the best decision she could make at the time. Learning that Gio was that child forced her to confront the emotional weight of that past decision all over again. For Gio, the revelation carried its own devastating consequences. The sudden realization that the woman he had known was actually his biological mother left him struggling with anger, confusion, and a profound sense of betrayal. The emotional fallout rippled outward, affecting everyone around them and turning what should have been a joyful moment of discovery into a complicated process of healing. Because of the turmoil surrounding Gio, Brook began to question whether moving forward with another adoption so quickly would only create further emotional instability. She worried that pursuing the adoption of baby Jane while her relationship with Gio was still fragile might send the wrong message, as if she were attempting to replace the son she had lost years ago. That fear pushed her to pause the adoption plans despite how much it meant to Chase. It was not a decision made lightly. Brook understood how deeply Chase longed to become a father, and she carried the guilt of knowing that circumstances once again seemed to be standing in the way of his dream. Yet she also recognized that rebuilding trust with Gio required patience, honesty, and time. The process of reconnecting with her son became a delicate balancing act, one that demanded emotional vulnerability from both of them as they slowly began to understand each other's perspectives. Now that Brook and Gio have gradually begun to form a fragile but genuine mother-son bond, the atmosphere around the adoption conversation has shifted again. Brook has finally reached a place where she feels ready to move forward, signaling that she is willing to revisit the idea of adopting Jane with Chase. For the couple, this moment feels like the return of hope after a long period of emotional uncertainty. However, the possibility that Jane's biological father could suddenly appear introduces a new layer of tension that threatens to disrupt everything. Such an arrival would not only complicate the legal process, but also challenge the emotional foundation Brook and Chase have worked so hard to build. If the father asserts his rights, the adoption could collapse overnight, leaving the couple once again facing heartbreak. The looming question is whether their love and determination will be strong enough to endure yet another devastating twist, or whether this unexpected development will shatter the family they have been fighting so hard to create. Only a few days after Brook and Harrison Chase had their tense and emotional conversation with Alexis, another unexpected and deeply troubling event unfolded that would soon change everything. What had begun as a quiet attempt to reclaim a sense of peace quickly turned into a moment that neither of them could have anticipated. Early in the week, the couple decided to take a walk together through the park, hoping the calm surroundings and fresh air might offer them a brief escape from the complicated emotions that had been weighing on them for weeks. Their lives had been filled with uncertainty, family revelations, and painful decisions, so this simple outing felt like a rare opportunity to reconnect and breathe. The atmosphere was gentle and unassuming, the kind of ordinary moment that couples share when they are trying to hold on to something steady in the middle of chaos. Yet, that fragile calm shattered when they noticed something unusual near one of the park benches. A young woman lay motionless nearby, her body slumped awkwardly against the cold wood of the seat, as if she had collapsed without warning. As Brook, Lynn, and Chase rushed closer, their concern quickly turned into alarm when they realized the woman was Delilah, who was heavily pregnant and clearly unconscious. The sight alone was enough to send a wave of panic through both of them. Delilah's breathing was shallow, her skin pale and clammy, and there was an unmistakable sense that something had gone terribly wrong. Neither Brook, Lynn, nor Chase knew exactly what had happened to her before they arrived, but the scene carried an unsettling air of mystery. There were no obvious signs of what had caused her collapse, no clear explanation for how a pregnant woman could end up alone and unresponsive in a public park. The uncertainty made the situation even more frightening. Brooklyn instinctively knelt beside her, trying to wake her, while Chase immediately shifted into the calm, decisive mindset that years of police training had instilled in him. Even before Delilah regained partial consciousness, they both understood that whatever had happened was far more serious than it appeared. When Delilah finally stirred slightly, she seemed disoriented and frightened, insisting weakly that she did not want to go to the hospital. Her reluctance only heightened the couple's concern. Something in her reaction suggested fear rather than simple discomfort, as though she was trying to avoid medical attention for reasons she could not explain in that moment. Brook, Lynn, and Chase exchanged uneasy glances, recognizing that whatever Delilah was hiding might be part of a much larger story, but there was no time to investigate her reasons. Her physical condition was clearly deteriorating, and both of them knew that waiting any longer could place both her life and the life of her unborn child in even greater danger. Despite Delilah's protests, they refused to take the risk. Chase helped support her, while Brook, Lynn continued urging her to hold on until they could get help. The urgency of the moment left no room for debate, and soon Delilah was on her way to the hospital, where doctors could assess the situation. What followed was a heartbreaking series of events that unfolded with brutal speed. Doctors quickly realized that Delilah's condition was far more critical than anyone had initially believed. She was suffering from severe internal bleeding in the abdominal region, a complication that had likely been worsening for hours before she collapsed in the park. The medical team acted immediately, performing an emergency cesarean section in a desperate attempt to save the baby while also stabilizing the mother. For a brief moment, there was hope that both lives might be spared. The delivery itself was successful, and the newborn girl, soon known as Baby Jane, was brought safely into the world. She responded well to treatment and was quickly placed under careful observation. Her tiny body fought hard, and doctors soon confirmed that she was stable and recovering. But while the child's future suddenly seemed possible, Delilah's condition continued to spiral beyond the reach of medical intervention. Despite every effort from the hospital staff, Delilah could not be saved. The internal bleeding had already caused catastrophic damage by the time she arrived, and even the swift actions of experienced doctors were not enough to reverse the damage that had been done. The news of her death cast a heavy shadow over what should have been the miracle of a new life. Baby Jane survived, but the woman who had carried her for months was gone, leaving behind a child who would never know her mother. For Brook, Lynn, and Chase, the tragedy felt almost surreal. Just hours earlier, they had been enjoying a quiet walk, trying to focus on their own uncertain future, and now they found themselves standing at the edge of someone else's devastating loss. The contrast between life and death was painfully stark. A child had entered the world strong and resilient, yet the woman who brought her there had paid the ultimate price, leaving behind unanswered questions about what had truly happened to her in the hours before she collapsed. At the hospital, before the tragedy reached its final and devastating moment, Delilah had made one quiet but meaningful request. As the medical staff prepared paperwork and procedures for what they initially believed might be a routine discharge, she asked Brook, Lynn to accompany her into the room where the paperwork would be finalized. The request carried an unexpected intimacy, especially considering how little time the two women had known each other. Yet something in Delilah's expression revealed a mixture of fear, exhaustion, and fragile trust. Brook, Lynn agreed without hesitation, gently holding Delilah's hand as she tried to reassure her that everything would be all right. In that brief moment, Brooklyn spoke with the kind of quiet conviction that people offer when they desperately want to believe the words themselves. The promise was simple but heartfelt, an attempt to comfort a frightened woman who clearly felt alone in the world. At the time, Brooklyn had no reason to believe that those few words would become one of the last moments of comfort Delilah would ever experience. Although their acquaintance had been brief, something about Delilah had touched Brooklyn deeply. Perhaps it was the vulnerability in the young woman's eyes, or the unmistakable sense that Delilah had been carrying more than just a child inside her. She had also been carrying fear, secrets, and a heavy emotional burden. Brooklyn had always possessed a strong instinct to protect those who appeared lost or vulnerable, and Delilah seemed to embody both qualities. Their connection formed quickly in the emotionally charged environment surrounding the pregnancy and the unexpected crisis. Now, with Delilah gone, that short-lived bond had transformed into something painfully significant. Brooklyn could not stop replaying those final moments in her mind, wondering whether there had been something she could have done differently, some hidden warning she might have missed. The grief she felt was complicated and difficult to explain to others. She had not known Delilah long enough for their relationship to have deep history, yet the tragedy had unfolded so suddenly that it left a profound emotional mark on her. What began as compassion had quickly evolved into a sense of responsibility that she could not ignore. In the episode that aired on Thursday, March 5, that sense of responsibility took shape in a promise made between Brooklyn and Chase. Standing together in the aftermath of the tragedy, they both acknowledged that baby Jane had entered the world under circumstances that were as heartbreaking as they were mysterious. The child had lost her mother within hours of being born, and no family members had stepped forward to claim her. Faced with that reality, Brooklyn and Chase made a solemn vow that they would do everything within their power to find Jane's relatives. Until that day came, they promised they would watch over the baby and make sure she was safe and cared for. For Chase, the promise came naturally. His instinct as both a police officer and a man who valued family above all else compelled him to protect the vulnerable whenever possible. For Brooklyn, however, the vow carried a deeper emotional undercurrent. Each time she looked at the tiny child in the hospital nursery, she felt the weight of Delilah's absence and the fragile life that had been left behind. Yet, the circumstances surrounding Delilah's collapse remained deeply puzzling. No one knew why she had been alone in the park, why she seemed reluctant to seek medical help, or what had led to the internal injuries that ultimately claimed her life. The unanswered questions created a quiet tension that lingered over the entire situation. Nathan West took it upon himself to examine Delilah's belongings, hoping that something might provide a clue about her identity or reveal a person who could be contacted. When he searched through her wallet, however, he discovered almost nothing of use. There were no clear identification details that could lead them to family members, no emergency contact numbers, and no documents that might explain where she had come from or who she trusted. The absence of those details made the situation even more unsettling. It was as if Delilah had existed on the edges of society, carrying her secrets with her and leaving behind only a newborn child as evidence of the life she had lived.